Welcome to the ClimateTech Summit. My name is Chante Harris, and I'm the Director of Climate Investment and Partnerships for Venture for Climate Tech. Yesterday, you heard from our Managing Director, Jacqueline Rosamable, and our incredible founders leading the charge to advance climate solutions. Today, I'd like to welcome you all to the second day of great discussions and conversations. I'd also like to invite you into the spirit of optimism that we discussed yesterday. At ClimateTech, we believe that innovators can create a brighter, more equitable future. Venture for Climate Tech is a hybrid studio and accelerator program that supports the earliest stage climate tech founders in accessing the tools, talent, capital, and community they need to launch and build their ambitious companies. Thank you to this incredible community we've built, many of you who have joined us yesterday and today. Perhaps you're just hearing about the ClimateTech team, and if so, we're lucky to have you. We are using the hashtag FCT Summit 21, so please feel free to share quotes, photos, and thoughts using that hashtag so our team can reshare throughout the day. Thank you to our partner NYSERDA, our sponsors CARTA and SVB for their support with convening us all here today, and our guest keynote speaker, Jigar Shah, who I have had the pleasure of conversing with in the past and today. We're going to give a brief intro to Jigar, and we're going to welcome him up on stage now. I'm sure you all are very familiar with his bio, so I won't read the whole thing, but Jigar was most recently the co-founder and president at Generate Capital, where he focused on helping entrepreneurs accelerate decarbonization solutions through the use of low-cost infrastructure as a service financing. Prior to Generate Capital, Shah founded SunEdison, a company that pioneered pay-as-you-save solar financing. After SunEdison, Shah served as the founding CEO of the Carbon War Room, a global nonprofit founded by Sir Richard Branson and Virgin Unite to help entrepreneurs address climate change. Originally from Illinois, he holds a BS from the University of Illinois UC and an MBA from the University of Maryland College Park. I'm thrilled to have him on stage with us today, in large part because I've gotten to work with him many times, and also I've gotten to lead dialogues with him and really appreciate his background working across various sectors. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and jump into our first question so that you can give a little more background if you want, Jigar, but also dive into your experience. So having been a founder, an investor, and now running loan programs for the Department of Energy, how has your vast experience shaped your view of the climate crisis?
So great to see you, and it's so great to be here. Yeah, look, I mean, I think that it's all hands on deck. I mean, we've been at this for some time, and I think that in 2008, right, when we were talking about this a lot, right, the Apollo Alliance and the unions got together to put together this whole big plan and all these things, I think people were genuinely concerned as to whether the technology was ready and whether we really did have an ability to meet the moment. And a lot of us worked hard, right, to be able to get to where we are today, where 80% of everything we connect to the grid now is clean, right? So 80% of everything we connect to the grid now is close to zero emission. And so that's a huge difference from where we were in 2008. But I think when you think about where the industry is, I would say the industry, and I was part of it, didn't really think about what the federal government was doing. They thought about, oh, do we have tax credits? Do we have some of these things? But otherwise, the planning cycle around what does it take on the transmission side to get to net zero by 2035, right? What does it take in terms of scaling up technology around carbon sequestration and storage or green hydrogen or all these other things? I think there was a lot of feeling that this just needed to be done outside of government. And I think that was something that I didn't share. And so when I got asked to serve, I jumped at the chance because I think that it's important for there to be this bridge between the federal government and entrepreneurs in the private sector, and to try to figure out how both work together to be able to get to the climate-friendly outcome that we want to get to.
Amazing. Yeah, having worked in the government myself, and then now being able to help founders scale, particularly at the earliest stages of climate tech, I always get really excited when we see people like you kind of jumping in and out of sectors and really leading the charge on solutions at really I think every stage, and also looking at various sectors' role in the work that we're all doing. I've heard you talk a lot about how the loans program office can build a bridge to bankability. What advice would you give early stage founders in the For Climate Tech umbrella? But we also have hundreds of founders who RSVP'd for the event today that aren't a part of this community, but hopefully will be, as they think about financing their companies and go to market.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that most founders, frankly, don't have to think about in the early stages, right? They just have to survive. They have to raise their seed round and their A round and, et cetera, et cetera. I'd say, in general, when you think about what it takes to solve climate change, every single number starts with a T, right? It's $1 trillion, right? And so whether you're talking about decarbonization through solar or wind or nuclear or geothermal or battery storage or offshore wind, or if you're talking about electric vehicles, EV charging, right? I mean, no matter what area you decide to focus on and where your technology is, we're talking about $1 trillion markets, right? And so that means that at some point, once you get through your seed, A, B, even your C and D rounds, at some point you have to be able to attract commercial debt, right? There's no way to get to where you want to get to until your technology can get to commercial debt, right? And so at some point you have to think about that. And so there are some companies who have SPAC'd, right? They've got $2 billion of cash sitting in the bank and no access to commercial debt, right? And so the loan programs office is where you come to build a bridge to bankability, right? So the first part of that bridge is the first of a kind deployment, right? And you see that with Climeworks and carbon engineering on the carbon sequestration and storage side. You see that with sustainable aviation fuels. You see that with battery storage, where you've got new chemistries, right? So they need a first of a kind deployment, right? So that people can say, oh, this stuff actually works, right? Then they need to replicate it, right? Second, third, fourth, fifth projects, right? So can they get their engineering costs down? Can they do it again and again and again? Then you actually have the learning curve, right? How do you get to 7 cumulative doublings of experience so you can get your technology to be cost effective? Sure, it's 3x too expensive right now on the hydrogen side. Let's say there's stuff at $5 a kilogram that need to be at $1, right? But you don't get there. That's what solar, wind, lithium-ion batteries proved, unless you get a whole bunch of volume deployed, right? And then the fourth piece is just getting full acceptance by the commercial banks. There's a lot of technologies that actually deserve full acceptance where the commercial banks are like, seems like a lot of work. We don't want to get there, right? And the loan programs office has proven time and again that we can actually help technology companies cross that bridge and get to the other side where they can get attractively priced commercial debt.
Yeah, I love your point around volume. I think that's so important, having scaled founders and companies in the past. It's like, all right, we do this one thing, now we have to do it twice and 3 times and sort of keep doing it, keep creating buy-in and ensuring that, there can actually be scalability over time. I think, what I've heard you say, and I think something that is starting to be talked about a bit more, but still kind of gets lost in the conversation when we talk about climate tech, is the fact that government isn't new to catalyzing solutions in this space. They've served as a role, or they served a huge role in development and key R&D innovation across climate for, I think, decades now, really. So what are some opportunities for those building businesses in this space that are ready for scale and deployment that they might not be thinking about as it relates to government?
Yeah, I think that, so for a long time, we've had a point of view that if something is not cost effective enough, we should throw more R&D dollars at it to be able to get it to be more cost effective, right? And I think what we proved in solar, wind, and lithium-ion batteries, as well as EVs, is that it's actually a symbiotic relationship, right? That like once the technology is ready for prime time, it has to be deployed, right? And that's the only way that you can actually get the cost down, right? It's not through R&D, it's through deployment, right? And then R&D continues to help that technology get down the cost curve. So in solar, for instance, when I joined the solar industry, we already had a very stable package for solar, right? That could last for 25 years, right? The solar panels of today are the exact same packaging that we invented in 1992, right? So when I joined the solar industry in 1995 and then started Sun Edison in 2003, the solar panel was already stable. That R&D had already been completed, right? Now what DOE did was help, with PERC cells, bifacial panels, all these other things that went from a 12% efficiency for solar panels now up to about 20% efficiency, right? And that's critical, right? We would have never gotten to the price point that we're at today without that level of R&D support. But if we hadn't started to deploy through the Japanese solar roof program, the German solar roof program, the California solar program in 2001, we would have never gotten that symbiotic relationship to get the costs all the way to where we are today. So DOE plays a critical role. But I think one of the things that we've shifted our position on is that when a technology is ready from a safety and reliability point of view, then we really need to deploy and then keep assisting it with R&D going forward. And that is a new point of view that the Secretary of Energy is bringing to the table.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear, because I think, a lot of the innovations, they have to be tested over and over, right? And the idea is that you want to be iterating on them to improve them over time. So that's really, really exciting. I'm happy that you all are obviously thinking about it that way and doing the work around that. The next question actually comes from one of our founders in our portfolio, Bill, who is the founder of New Frontier Aerospace. And his question is, like Tesla 10 years ago, their business involves decarbonizing a large greenhouse gas emitting industry by building both vehicles and supporting fueling and recharging infrastructure. Similarly, their climate impact requires the build out of net carbon negative renewable fuel infrastructure, as well as building cleaner air vehicles. Would a Title 17 Innovative Energy Loan Guarantee or an advanced technology vehicles manufacturing loan be better for a company like theirs?
Well, I think that the answer is yes. so come into the office. Like, we absolutely are supposed to be helping on taking something like the decarbonization of airplanes and being helpful to catalyzing that sector. And so right now, we don't have the right to support airplanes in the ATVM, the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program, because it's only for passenger cars. So it doesn't even apply to medium duty, heavy duty vehicles, let alone airplanes. Now, there is language in legislation that would expand our scope and might include airplanes. So we'll wait and see if that passes. But we can support the rollout of a fleet in Title 17. So we have several people providing applications in Title 17 under the efficient energy mandate to be able to decarbonize airplanes there. So we're very excited about that. And we're also supporting the supply chain. So whether it's hydrogen, we're doing a lot of green hydrogen projects, whether it's sustainable aviation fuels, we're doing several sustainable aviation fuel projects. So we have the ability to support the fuel supply chain as well as the rollout of the actual electric airplanes or hydrogen powered airplanes that we have seen on the drawing boards from entrepreneurs around the country.
Amazing. Yeah. And I feel like you always make yourself really accessible to founders. I know when Clubhouse was really big, you were pretty regular on there hosting kind of office hours and letting folks ask you questions, which might have been actually even during the transition. So it's, you're in the right role, right? So the next question is, what are some common challenges to bankability for solutions advancing energy efficiency? Having been a founder yourself and scaling solutions, how are you and your team at the Department of Energy really addressing, I think, some of these hurdles that founders experience?
Yeah, so I think that this is why engaging with the Department of Energy is so important, because we do have various programs, and those programs go through a cycle. So like, in the beginning of the cycle, for instance, if we get all this money from Congress, there will be a planning cycle. And so your technology will be included or not included, depending on whether someone engages with that planning cycle and actually says, hey, we have this new technology over here. It'd be nice to make sure that our technology qualifies for grants, right? And so if it doesn't make the list, it's not because we cut it off the list. It's because no one asked for it to be on the list. I mean, we're generally pretty inclusive. And so making sure that your trade association or your company is actually making sure you're on the list is important. And then when you're on the list, then we have early grant programs for R&D. We have, and then SBIR, right, Small Business Innovation programs. We have demonstration programs. So once you've gotten your technology to a stable point, deploying the first technology, whether it's nuclear power or geothermal or hydro or other things, we can pay for 50% of the cost of the first deployment or a second deployment, which is great. And then you've got the Loan Programs Office, which takes it the rest of the way. So there's a lot of programs within the Department of Energy to help with bankability. There's also a lot of technical assistance and market studies and things like that we do. But I think that in general, it requires people to spend time explaining what your technology can do and what its potential is. And that is often things that I think founders don't think about when they allocate their time.
Yeah, that makes me think about a question that I know we might not have discussed, but I'm interested particularly because we have all of these programs popping up supporting founders, as an ecosystem player, as someone who's helping to lead, this venture studio accelerator hybrid model. Do you think there are ways that ecosystem players can actually make more of those opportunities for founders or present them to them? Because I know founders are always so just really focused, right, but also very busy on building their company and don't always have the time or even the flexibility to engage in some of those conversations. So what are ways that myself, Jackie, our managing director, our entire team can kind of be thinking about creating those opportunities for founders to do that explanation of their technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's lots of ways to do this, right? There are trade associations. So many trade associations already exist, and they love their younger companies because even though they don't pay very much in dues, they're the exciting part of the industry. And so people like to talk about the exciting new companies. And so making sure you pay the $50 or $500 as a member of those organizations matter. The other thing that some of these incubators and other collectives are doing is hiring people in DC to educate people, right? There are several prominent firms where, you might cost $10,000 to $20,000 a month to retain them. And if 20 companies go in for $1,000 a month to pay for that, then those folks are actually walking around the halls of Congress regularly. They're walking around the agencies, making sure that a lot of these connective tissue things get done. And so investing in that, can be important so that people make sure that they include those technologies in the planning process, include those technologies in some of the definitions. I'm getting emails from people now saying, hey, I just read the definition of transmission. It doesn't look like my technology qualifies, even though I'm a transmission technology. And I was like, well, you didn't engage 6 months ago when you were supposed to, right? And so now, we can try to fix it now, but it's hard to fix it after the fact when the language has been proposed. And so I think it's important for people to recognize that you got to get in the game. And it doesn't mean that the founder, him or herself, needs to get in the game, but the company has to get in the game. And that means they have to make sure that those resources are expended.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I feel like for the past several years, I've kind of been that connector between, government and corporates and startups. And I think, the education piece and just the dialogue is so critical. So thank you for that. I know we have a couple of questions left. I do want to try and breeze through them all, so we'll see what happens. But what solutions or technologies do you find most promising at the moment as it relates to going to market over the next several years? And how does that correlate with how you and your team are thinking about your work?
So I think that micro is something we're really focused on, right? So I think when you look at the arc of innovation in the United States, today your iPhone is more powerful than all the computers it took to put, man on the moon, right? And so we are now at a place where bigger is not always better. In fact, smaller is beautiful. And so whether it's like demand flexibility resources where your refrigerator and your water heater can, be aggregated up within the grid to provide demand flexibility to save the grid, like happened in California, Texas, and New York this year, or whether it's your electric vehicles and figuring out whether they can be bidirectional, figuring out how you actually think about small solutions locally. I think that we're starting to realize that a lot of these weather events are a more common occurrence, and people have to become more resilient. That whole stream of technologies are not just a cost center, right? Which is what like a natural gas or a diesel generator used to be, it's a cost to protect your family. Now, when you think about batteries or the things that you can put into your ecosystem, those things not only can protect your family, but can also be used by the grid every day to manage day-to-day needs of the grid, and you can get paid for that, right? And so all of those technologies, of which there are hundreds, have frankly not been thought of as a mainstream solution for decarbonization. But as we merge, justice issues, as well as figuring out how we allow low moderate income consumers to become part of a solution, not just get access to technology, but actually get paid to provide the solution, that whole suite of technologies become central.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so critical, that local kind of smaller approach. It doesn't mean we don't think big, but how do we also think about granular solutions and ways to engage customers? And we've been pushing our founders to think about that now at the earliest stages so that they can really have that lens going into various markets. And I know you and I initially met, I think, through Daphne Rose Sanchez, doing the Equity Energy Efficiency Day. And I just always really appreciate you bringing that lens to the work that you do and the way you talk about community and equity. So thank you for that. My next question, we have time, we're good. So you have shared multiple articles and thoughts referencing the need for investing in our manufacturing sector. In a recent article in The Atlantic, there was a really great quote that essentially said, the gap in the manufacturing sector is holding back the country and the world's technological process. One of the biggest improvements to given technology happened not in the university lab, but on the factory floor, in exchange of knowledge between engineers and machinists, called learning by doing. What are the current opportunities and challenges to revitalizing manufacturing in this country? And how will that impact, technology development implementation?
Yeah, look, I think the secretary addressed this directly in an op-ed that she wrote for USA Today, where she said, look, I'm tired of all this technology being invented by the Department of Energy and then going overseas to get commercialized and scaled up for manufacturing, right? And I want to see it manufactured here. And so I think when you think about all of the different people that are starting to work together, from the utility companies to the energy companies to the state governments and economic development authorities to the unions to many other stakeholders, and then the Loan Programs Office obviously has a big role. I mean, we were the ones who provided the loan to Tesla to manufacture them here in the United States, right? So when you think about all of the different people who need to talk about this, and then you've got the Congress who are allocating 48C credits, which provide grants to people who manufacture stuff here. You think about the Ossoff-Wyden bill, which provides subsidies for manufacturing solar panels here in the United States, as well as other components in wind, et cetera. I think that there is a lot of brain power going into how we make Buy American work. And it's hard, right? Because we frankly have not worked on this in a really detailed and persistent fashion for the better part of 40 years, right? And so we're now making up for lost time. There was some planning work done over the last 15 years, but not a lot of it was really implemented. And when you implement, you sometimes succeed and sometimes fail. And so we've got to get people to understand how this ecosystem needs to be supported and under what conditions private sector capital is willing to invest in manufacturing here in the United States. And we got to create those conditions so that they feel comfortable.
Yeah, thank you for that. Super helpful. And maybe we can find that link and try to drop it in the chat so people can take a look at that article you mentioned. Okay, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but I do want to ask just a couple of closing questions. So what can we learn from Clean Tech 1.0? I feel like everyone's talking about it. Now we're in climate tech. What is it that we can be looking at as it relates to, what happened then versus what's happening now, and how we can really scale amazing solutions in this space?
Yeah, I don't know that I frankly don't find this topic very interesting. I think the venture capitalists are mostly navel gazing around this stuff. In general, the biggest problem that we've had in the past is that there simply wasn't enough demand, right? It's not enough to innovate a new technology, even if it's cheaper, right? Someone has to actually buy it. And in 2004, 2005, 2006, there weren't a lot of people buying. Today, everybody and their brother has a net zero target. Mm-hmm. They're buying, right? There are people buying carbon credits at $300 a ton, $1,000 a ton, right? There are people who are like actually buying electric vehicles for their fleet. There are people who are actually converting their school buses or transit buses to electric vehicles. There are people who are actually replacing their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system with one that doesn't use HFCs, right? That are, 20,000 times worse for the planet than CO2. There are people actually deploying technology. And the more that we have demand, well, then by definition, the more likely there is a market for these technology innovators to sell into, and there's more likely that the climate tech investors will make money on their investments, right? It's as simple as that, right? We focus so much on supply, right? How do we make sure these companies get seed rounds and A rounds and B rounds and all sorts of stuff? We need to focus just as much on demand. How do we make sure that the federal government procures green, which is what the president has announced? How do we make sure that the state governments procure green? The city governments procure green, right? It is amazing to me. We now have established that Teslas or electric vehicles for police cars have a 2.5-year payback. Why is every police car in the country not being converted to electric vehicles? Inertia, right? So climate activists have to go to their mayors and city council members and say, why are you not doing the stuff that actually makes financial sense, and do it now? We need that demand.
Yeah. Excuse me. That was great. I think, yes, the demand side is so important. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about customers and, local and granular, like people have to be there to adopt these technologies, which means they have to understand them. They have to get how they work and why, they are part of that customer base. So really excited to continue that conversation with you. If folks want to stay in touch with, the work that you're doing at the Department of Energy, what's the best way, whether it's, your social media, or channels that they can sign up for so they can get updates as founders or anyone else in the space looking to be helpful?
Yeah, I'm very active on social media, Twitter and LinkedIn mostly, just because I think it's important to have these conversations in public so there's others that can benefit from the conversation. So feel free to reach out to me in both places. And then if you want to actually apply for the Loan Programs Office or do a pre-consultation around whether you qualify, then you just email us at lpo@hq.doe.gov. And we're very excited to hear from you. We have 12 full-time outreach people that do nothing but hold people's hands through the process. And so we're trying to make this as easy as possible for folks to access our office.
Amazing. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. This was so fun. It's always such a pleasure chatting with you and hearing about all of the amazing work that you're doing. Up next, we are going to move into our afternoon sessions where you can hear about a lot of the different technologies that we were just mentioning in this conversation. So please go on over to the sessions tab on the left-hand side of your screen and join our incredible founders, additional guest speakers, as we dive into some of the more specific discussions that we were just having. We'll come back for a partner highlight right after with Silicon Valley Bank and Kelly Belcher to talk about their recent climate tech report. So thank you all for joining us, Jigar. Again, always such a pleasure and excited to stay in touch.
Thanks for having me. Really great event.
Amazing. Bye.